We've been talking about some timeline stuff. Can you see my screen, by the way?
Yeah, I can see it now.
Okay. We're not going to stick 100% of the time on the PowerPoint. We're going to dip into some notebooks. We're going to dip into GreyNoise on occasion. My talk is called Out of Touch, Out of Timeline. And mostly it's about temporal correlation, which is a fancy word for looking at the spots on the GreyNoise timeline and trying to be like, how can I operationalize this? Before I get into this, who am I? This is the standard slide. I have kind of two lives, my hobbyist life, my day job. My day job, I'm an engineer at Dragos. I've worn a lot of hats. Most of them tend to be data related. I want to say I'll give an example of my resume, which I think is most unfortunate that is data related. I was a data scientist at Boeing for a period. In my non-day job, my hobbyist role, I'm kind of a semi-pro threat hunter. I don't make money off it. I don't need to make money off of it. Instead, I think of it as an interesting link up of my past life as an area specialist and my current role. Likewise, I do translation work. I did a lot of the translation, initial translation of the tabularized data for the Anjouan leak as an example. And I'm a D&D nerd. You can find me on Mastodon and InfoSec Exchange, and soon there will be a GitHub repo with what I'm, at least a slice of what I'm showing you today. So what do I mean by time series stuff? So I'm going to tell a story. It's roughly going to be how I got involved with GreyNoise, how I used it for independent research, and then what's happening with it now. I use GreyNoise to basically look at how early stage reconnaissance works with PRC subnets. I do this quite, I will say, not in necessarily an ordered way initially, and increasingly I've become slightly more ordered. I started very broadly. I was mostly interested in how scanning works in general. There's a dense literature which I can add to this deck because scanning to some degree is a function of the Great Firewall of China. It's used to detect out of policy hosts as well as tunneling activity. There's a great deal of literature on this, and a lot of it is tied to fun research questions like, how does a Great Firewall detect shadow socks? I won't necessarily dive into this. Instead, I want to stay very high level and be like, how can we're going to be mostly looking at how you can use some of the data shared in GreyNoise to kind of survey alongside some other companion sites. With this initial research, I started with a /16, which I will note the amount of IPs associated with subnets because there's going to be a lot of subnet math here. 110.52.0.0/16 is basically the 256 times 256 addresses right of the 110.52. So to save math, that's around 65,536 hosts. I use a presumption that if you slice into /24s, /24 is the last 256 the bit, you'll find some rational activity within them. Just an arbitrary way to organize scanning behavior. Is it something that necessarily is how people organize or system administrators organize their behavior? Not necessarily, but certainly some people do. You have to slice. You have to cut the pie. And what I found at that time in 2023 is the /24s ending in 194, or excuse me, the 194, 195, 216, 217 subnets were actively crawling the SSL targeting the US predominantly. This was with a lot of data, like thousands of hosts across those 4 subnets. Near 2024, a lot of things have changed with this one subnet. Namely, we've gone from about 1,200 scanners to 300. And I think what is most surprising of all, if you go based on the GreyNoise data, within the same /16, we've gone from 500 malicious scanning hosts down to 4. And this is like marked malicious over a 3-month period. So again, this is around the same period. This is in 2020, spring 2023. And that there's been this huge change based off of just looking at 2 different data sets is kind of making me think, is there something happening in the actual timeline that I'm not picking up? This is especially the case with spoofed IPs that seem to occur with exceptionally distinct timelines. In this case, I have 2 different IPs, very different parts of the IP space based on my hypothesis, but they're doing extraordinarily similar activities. Going to 110.52.194.126 on port 22's scanning on Feb 17 for Israel, just one day. Same deal with this companion IP. And then I'll just pop into the UI to show exactly how this shows up. So this is under timeline, that same IP. Again, it's spoofed, so this will come into play a little later. Yeah, last 3 months, just one day. Southern host, companion host, same day. Informally, I've noticed this increasingly in the new year across many PRC subnets. This will be something that won't come back up in this talk, but it will be kind of a future research milestone, I believe, that I will return to. So, given that data set is now 300 scanners, only 4 of which are tagged malicious, and many of them which could have incomplete, for instance, TCP handshakes, makes it kind of incumbent. The idea is, what is going on with these timelines? But actually entertain that, I need to find a new IP space. In this case, I picked 113.220.0.0/14, just slightly larger space. It's 262,000 hosts versus around 66,000. So it's more or less quadrupled in expanse. I'm mostly concentrated on /24s, like previous. Physically, it implies actually not. We've changed ISPs from Unicom to China Telecom. Very similar geos. They're both labeled as Changsha. My best guess is that it's fairly distributed, but if you want to see like the largest data set in the area, we're probably moving from the Xingsha Cloud Data Center, which is more in the periphery of the city, to Lotus Garden China Telecom building, which is closer to the center of the city, and is notable because in 2022 it caught fire. Just something that happened unrelated to its scan behavior, perhaps. What I notice looking at it in an aggregate, and I will provide some aggregate data in the repo, is that it's about 50-50 malicious to unknown, and around 100 times richer than the source than the old subject. So there's about 4,000 active scanning hosts, and then 5 subnets with greater than 100 malicious scanning hosts. And this is closer to what I used in the year 2023. Using the same methods I used in my talk in 2023, I kind of looked at and generally fingerprinted the behavior within that /24 subnets. And I noticed there's a lot of telnet brute forcing, not so much SSL scanning, by GreyNoise's tagging. And there's a lot more diffuse scanners across geos, especially with pointing towards Taiwan. It's more similar to 23 era network comms than what we were seeing in 2024, which is very targeted and potentially spoofing. So, given this subject, how do we analyze this? Well, how can we look at timelines? And I want to say there's like two simple ways to go about this, just by using UX, which I found useful, or the UI. One is to look at one-off behaviors, which when I say one-off, it can be, it occurred at a very specific day towards a very specific destination, or it could be a little broader of days. I would suggest for featurization that you find the largest duration to define this, which I'll have some code building to this that I'll display later. Reoccurring gets into this as well, but it's not even just about the longest extent series of scanning, as it is, how many scan periods you have that are greater than X amount of contiguous days or hours, which again, I'll get into in a second. And we're going to eyeball some of these. So we'll go with .80, which scanned January 21 through 23. And just take a look at it through the timeline, and boop, yeah, just shows up here. It's meaning it has at least 1 hour for each 3 of these days that's scanned. It's looking at port 22, which, hey, it's an SSH brute forcer. It's targeting United States and Israel. So this leads to the question: is this similar? How similar is this to that one-off scan post that I showed previously? It's a good question. We need more variables to really kind of make sense of it. .96 is similar but different, using my favorite phrase. This one jumps between 2 different ports. So it's a one-off for 23, and then 23. Could it be that there was a misconfiguration that, I want to scan 23, but accidentally, configured it improperly? Maybe. Not much data necessarily go one way or the other. But again, it seems to target very specific destinations. It's doing scans in the United States and Indonesia. Another one-off example, which is malicious in this case, which is labeled Mirai, so it's definitely a little bit more opinionated. Middle of March, shows up Mirai, then goes into web crawling. It's 2 different ports, uses 2 different web agents, 2 different distinct configurations, and then 2 different user agents given 2 different ports as well. So there's very distinct behavior that's happening here. That's in a very short period of time, and again, United States and Spain very selectively. So this is one form of behavior which can be classified, I think, relatively easily. Recurrent behavior is where you get, I think, a little bit more richer features. We'll go into 197 as an example. And as you can see, even more user agents. Some of them are distinct in their difference. Like here is, I think it's Windows NT version that changes. I don't know why the scanner would change their NT version. I can understand why they're permuting through user agents, just in case somebody is, for instance, configuring a WEF to look at them. It's consistently by GreyNoise is consistently targeted as classified as malicious. It's doing Mirai looking things. In this case, however, prior to that, you do get some of the time to classify bill within the extra couple days where it's scanning 23 specifically. And on top of this, as a couple periods where it just stops. We don't have a story of why these breaks are happening. Could it be something based off of time of month? Is this an actor that, or a piece of infrastructure that just doesn't work at the beginning of the month? Is it something which doesn't work towards the middle of the month? We're not sure. We have to look at more pieces of data to really make sense of this. Another example, dot 50. It has a period where it's scanned once. And then if you were to look further, it has a more engaged period where it's malicious. In some cases, my hypothesis of what's happening is there's dynamism on some of these hosts. I would suspect if you were to go to a known VPS provider, you would find a lot of dynamism. You'd find these periods of no activity because whoever picked up the host decided not to do scanning behavior. Likewise, if you look at, and we'll look at Hunt, which is a great service which operates very similar to Census as Floof shown. But it has a display that's very useful for doing timeline analysis like this. And you can also look at it and be like, okay, here is cases where nothing was actually hosted on the server, or its behavior has changed dramatically several times over a short period of time. And to me, that is the features one would need to say, okay, this looks like a VPS. This is dynamic enough. As far as this actual subnet is concerned, I have no idea. This could be an ISP. We have the ASN information, and we know it is China Telecom. China Telecom doesn't really advertise what their hosting capabilities are within their very large subnets. So that's just something to keep in mind. So it's a slightly different behavior, a long period of time followed by a one-off behavior, potentially a useful time. And one last look at something which is more engaged behavior. This is, again, quite similar. Earlier behavior, where it was malicious, again, Mirai, on a couple of ports we've seen already, especially port 23, which just seems to pop up here and there. And yeah, extended use with tag Mirai with some very specific port activity. We'll return to Hunt a little bit later, just to show you the kind of view you can get out of that if you're looking more at hosting than scanning. But in general, I think going one by one comparisons can be pretty hard. So kind of the approach I decided to do with this is similar as how I was doing this sort of analysis. I decided to aggregate. So I will jump quickly into demo time. I have about 10 minutes, so I may not get into everything here. I've already to-do'd something, which I will mention. Don't think I will get into holidays, but you will see that in the module probably fairly soon. So let me jump to my Jupyter notebook. So this is preliminary to what I'm going to host on GitHub. There is a data from 2023 set up there. I'm going to include the Unicom data and the CT data. In general, I have 3 notebooks. EDA, exploratory data analysis, is the simplest way to go, and I'll get into I may have some interval research done, and then the really advanced stuff I'll get into lowest decomposition, just to be like, here is what the alpha nerds are using for this sort of stuff, and here are the limitations of it. So quick EDA. So what did I do? The sample CT aggregated pickle file, which I will include the pickle file in the repo, but I will have the scripts for grabbing it if you want to get a similar data set. Basically, I scanned every single, I used, this is within the time series. And this is, again, very rough code because I had to go fast. I more or less used the hourly summary API in GreyNoise in order to grab this data. Grabbing everything that I'd already knew had a valid scanning IP, by doing a summarization scan across the entire subnet. And I won't get into the actual subnet queries. That's fairly straightforward. If you have questions about any of the specific GreyNoise queries, you can ping me in Discord, and I can get to it. But focusing on some time series analysis. So basically, what I did is I took every single scan period, every single time there was a scan that occurred in an hour per IP, aggregated it all together, and was like, okay, what does this look like when we think about it as a time series? And this is roughly what it looks like. And if it looks jagged, hell yeah. It's very jagged because this is cut to hourly periods. So there's going to be certain periods where scans just don't happen. There's going to be periods where there's dramatic changes to scan behavior. I'll get into more hourly analysis in just a moment. But I mean, if you were to fit this curve, kind of looks like a weird downward shaped sine wave, which I don't have a hypothesis about why it's downward shaped or why the lump hits the beginning of 3-1. One of the challenges of time series analysis statistically is you don't have assumptions to help you out. It's what's called a non-parametric form of statistical analysis. Compare it with like a parametric form of statistical analysis, like say doing a t-test. You have the assumption, well, for the most part, you'll have the assumption of a normal curve. So you'll be trying to fit that. Most time series analysis, you're not going to be fitting to a Gaussian or a normal curve. So this makes it so we have to dive a little bit deeper into this. So one way I've decided to do this is, okay, we're gonna do what we always do. We're gonna split it into subnets. So 113.220.0, these are all the individual subnets broken out. And you can see this is something you see in aggregate. 221 is way more busy than companion subnets. If we break that out further, removing 221, everything is kind of all over the place. There doesn't seem to be much correlation between most of these subnets either. You can see periods, for instance, where 223 it has like a base form of like maybe it's performing some occasional scans, whereas 222 and 220 are very, very busy. Mainly the main correlated area is centered around 215. I don't have an answer for why this happens. It's just something our analysis provides us detail on. It's interesting, however, though, is if we look at 215, including 221, you see the bump here, and you see a nosedive here, which leads to questions, and unfortunately, not many answers. Moving forward, I did some analysis on day of time and where things are happening. It's worth noting this is in PST, which is my local time zone. So when you see bumps around 20 and like 2000 and 0500 PST, it's roughly coherent to 1700 and 0500 it's roughly coherent to midnight and noon UTC. So my working theory of what kind of standardizes behavior across these subnets is probably cron jobs. You'll notice I pulled out 221, but if you're to look at 221, which dwarfs everything else, it's it's around the same area. Let's see. And then if we're to look at day of the week in which things happen, again, pulling out 221 because it dwarfs all other behavior, you can kind of see actually day of the week, like it doesn't seem like there's human operators behind this. Like Saturday and Sunday, or none operators that care about day of week. There's not a coherent. So you can see Friday, Monday, Saturday. You can see Friday, Monday, Saturday, Sunday growing upwards, but that's not a sequential day of week for 222. And in general, it seems more random than not. looking at this. And in fact, the one I would say interesting feature, which could be extracted and used to your advantage, is that the day of week is not correlated among these subnets. They have distinct behaviors. A good example of this is you see, like I was saying, there's an additive trend Friday, Monday, Saturday, Sunday for 222. 223, it's not ordered like that. So that's some quick EDA on this front. I'm running close to out of time, so I will show a quick previews here. I did some quick holiday analysis. Here's when scans occurred during certain holidays. The holidays are summation of North American holidays, and global holidays such as New Year's Eve. North American holidays like MLK Day, and APAC holidays such as Spring Festival and Qingming. We have a lot of activity even when there is a holiday, which gives me kind of a beginning theory. And again, one should probably do something like a t-test to say, hey, is this a statistically significant difference? The hosts, which are that scan very very constantly, does the holiday matter? And that's something you can bring statistical rigor to. In this case, just eyeballing the data as one would do in doing simple exploratory data analysis, it seems okay. Well, clearly there's no bias towards Western holidays so far. But again, this is something that should be corrected for duration. Jumping to decomp. So if you really want to look even closer into seasonality and to see, is there periodicity to this actual data, STL decomposition is a very useful approach. Again, it makes no assumptions about distribution. You're merely fitting a linear algorithm, a low-S algorithm, to say, hey, given this sort of periodicity and given that there's a seasonality of 7, try to break out this overall hits per hour trend line or line into a trend component, the season component, and a residual. And mostly what we get out of this is a clear marking of where those spikes were, which was, we go back to the EDA, we'll say it's, for instance, this is the one that's early, I think mid-February. There's a little bit more work that can be done. I'll hop here. I see some additional work to be done for, like I said, doing a rigorous comparison of US holidays versus APAC holidays. I think there's, like I was mentioning when I was hopping through the UI, there's probably a way to create a classifier to compare longest sequence of contiguous sequence of scans versus not. And then really going into the deep side, I highly suggest, if you're interested in working with series, to look at the book Forecasting, which gets deeper into methods such as STL decomposition as well as prediction. In general, forecasting might not necessarily be great for creating features for scanning patterns, because, like I was mentioning, it's a combinatorially complex problem. You have to break down to subnets. You don't know where the shared infrastructure behaviors are. And as I mentioned previously, non-parametric methods are challenging. However, in general, looking at correlation across timestamps is really useful. Use it for platform logins. A friend liked to look at timestamp correlations between, say, Twitter and Gab, and say maybe an offsite WordPress site, which is really useful if you want to see where shared narratives are coming from. You can do it. It's definitely used to track financial transactions. Timestamp correlation is used for GeoGates specifically. Don't try to jump across a very low. Don't find ways to do transactions at ATMs that are thousands of miles apart, seconds apart, in other words. And Hunt also has, I think, UI that's very useful for this approach. This is a specific example of an open directory site, which you can tell because it has DC rat. But you can see it has certs popping around, which you can simply look at the duration and compare the duration of each of the certificate lifetimes and be like, is this a more ephemeral host than, more dedicated host that's part of infrastructure? So as I'm coming to the end of this talk, I will quickly conclude. Scanning behavior is not a constant behavior, and in specific, like year to year, in specific in 2024 PRC scanners, we're seeing a lot of weird spoofing behavior. The timing of scans are still giving you useful metadata that you can use to try to work on hypotheses of shared infrastructure. Mainly what you're looking for is common timings. What happens together, what happens apart. And in general, one should have knowledge of blessings and curse with this sort of approach. And con of there's no guarantees on patterns, and there's limited testability in some cases, meaning you don't get to assume like a normal distribution of data. You're working with your own known assumptions. But the good side is all you need are timestamps to really get started. And then the real upshot is literally every computer network operation is a timestamp. If it doesn't have a timestamp, it's even more sus than otherwise. So yeah, that is my talk on correlating time series using GreyNoise. I'll stop sharing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, Jonathan. I really appreciate you giving that presentation. Well, cool. Well, I guess we're gonna wrap it up here. Because that was the last talk. Jonathan, where can people follow you and things like that? Keep in touch.
Bees at InfoSec Exchange. Okay. I'm on Mastodon, like all the cool kids are.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, man.